Alright guys, we are finally starting on the twin turbo stuff. I know there was a previous episode that was like the first episode in this series of videos, but that was just doing prerequisite stuff with the fuel system. Now we're at the point where the car is not going to be driven again. Like, it's off the road, it's not going to be drifted at all. It's not going to be driven again until it's got turbos on it, which is a weird thing to say because it seems like it's going to be ages until that's actually done. But yeah, that's kind of the stage we're at now, is all the planning, all the stuff that I've quite enjoyed, all the research and the planning and everything is done. Now I've got to actually do all the work, which I'll be honest is kind of nerve-wracking because it's been fun doing the planning, but now that I've actually got to do it, there's still a lot of stuff that I'm quite unsure of. Like, you would think you could plan it all out and figure everything out, but there's a lot of things that for some reason I'm still just going to be kind of winging it and hoping that stuff fits and hoping I can figure out a way to make things work. So yeah, I've pretty much planned out all the bits that I need, which we'll go through in a second, some bits that have just turned up today, and that's why we're kind of starting today, because we've actually got all the stuff that we need to start on the exhaust manifold now. But yeah, it's just figuring out where things are going to fit, how we're going to do everything. So also, I don't know exactly what format I'm going to do these videos in. Originally, I wanted to do like one video per sort of part of the setup, so like one video for the exhaust manifold, one video for the intercooler setup, one video for the oil system, that sort of stuff. But in reality, I think that's going to take a long time to get the videos done because I'm going to be working on a lot of stuff at once. Like, I'll be doing the exhaust manifold and the intercooler stuff at the same time and probably do some other bits as well. So it'll end up being like months until the actual, like, each video is completed. Like, if I waited until I'd actually completed each part of the setup, if that makes sense. So I think we'll do it more sort of vlog style, just like one video a week or something like that, or whenever I get any significant amount of work done. Just kind of updating you on where we're at. Obviously, I'll film as much as I can. I don't want to make it too in-depth and like boring for people who just want to see like some sort of interesting highlights, essentially. I'm not going to go into like the different threads I'm using for different adapters and stuff like that, different size oil lines and stuff like that. But I will, when it's all done, put up I've got a spreadsheet where I've like kept track of all the stuff that I've bought, how much it cost, where I got it from. So when it's all done, I'll put that spreadsheet up for anyone to download, and then if someone is wanting to do something like this to their 350, they've got a good starting point of things that I've done to make mine work. Right, so this is some of the stuff that's turned up today from Walton Motorsport. The merge collector for the exhaust manifold, I was going to make it myself originally, but as you can probably tell, some of this stuff is a bit of a twat to weld and actually end up with it being nice. So yeah, they've done a really good job of it, so I'm glad I got them to do it, basically, because I would have not done anywhere near a good a job. And they've also like formed this to fit the like irregular shape of that flange, which again would have been a nightmare for me to do, and supplied them with a load of bits to make the actual exhaust manifold. And we'll go through all that later in a lot more detail, because we'll probably be doing the exhaust manifold in this video, I would have thought. But speaking of exhaust, the turbo, originally we were going to use an internal wastegate, which I opted for because I thought it would save space. Like, internal seems like it would save more space than external. The problem is, when this is on there, let me just get this into the right sort of orientation. Right, so when that's sat on there, something like that, you can see this actually sticks out quite a long way from the housing of the turbo. So even though it's an internal wastegate, it's got this external actuator, and it actually ends up taking up a lot of space right where we're quite limited for space, which is around here. So we're going to sack that off and basically weld up the internal wastegate flap. If anyone's not too sure on turbos and exactly how wastegates and stuff work, I'll give you a very, very brief run through while we've got the props here to demonstrate. Basically, your exhaust gas normally comes out your engine, goes in here, spins this turbine, which spins the turbine on the other side, which creates the boost pressure that comes out here and goes to your intake. Right, I'm assuming people are fairly familiar with that. But you might not necessarily want to run the absolute maximum pressure that your turbo can create, like the maximum boost pressure. If you think about how this works, if you just stayed on the throttle the whole time and the exhaust gas coming in here and it's spinning this faster and faster and faster, you're just creating more and more boost pressure until it gets to a certain point, obviously. But you might not want to run that absolute max pressure. So the wastegate allows the exhaust gas to escape and go round the turbine, basically. It bypasses this turbine. I should point out the exhaust would be like here. So the exhaust gas would go in there, spin the turbine, and then come out here and go into your exhaust. So what happens when the wastegate opens is, if you can see through there, yeah, you can see some daylight down there. See if I wave my hand down there. Yeah, basically the exhaust gas can just come straight down here, straight out of that flap, and it doesn't affect the turbine, so it doesn't spool the turbo up even more. So that's very useful, like I say, if you want to, like this has got like an 8 psi spring in it, I think. So basically once you get to 8 psi boost pressure, this will start to open and the exhaust gas can go around and your turbo will just stay at making 8 psi, it won't go above that. With an external one, what's going to happen is we're going to have a very similar thing. I'm going to weld this shut basically so this doesn't do anything. And you'll have the exhaust flange sat on there, and then you'll have like a T that comes off here somewhere, and that has an external wastegate on it. And then basically, normally the exhaust gas goes straight in here, spins the turbine as usual. When the wastegate opens, the exhaust gas goes into the T and like comes out this direction, and goes to like a screamer pipe, or you can make it join back into the stock exhaust or whatever. But yeah, there you go. There's wastegate 101. Also, side note, they don't make any noise. So when people say that, oh, you can hear the wastegate flutter or whatever, you don't hear that. That's a blow-off valve or a lack of. It's nothing to do with the wastegate. Right, I'm filming this a few days after the bit that you've just seen, but I'll kind of edit it in so that it makes sense, because this is related to what we were just talking about with the wastegates. Today, I got 2 external wastegates. So, as you can see, we've got these. This is one that I put together earlier, just to make sure I know what I'm doing with all the fittings and everything. We've got V-band flanges on both the inlet and the outlet. It's got water cooling as well, which is kind of weird for a wastegate, but as long as it helps things run cooler, that's always good. And yeah, I need to figure out exactly what we're doing with the ports, because we're going to be running an electronic boost controller. So we're going to have to figure out exactly which ports we need to use. But I'll do a separate video probably on that once I've got that all kind of in my head, exactly how we're going to run it. But yeah, tile, MVS, wastegates, 38mm I believe it was that I went for. I'm pretty sure it was 38mm. The smallest ones basically, because we're going to be running small turbos and relatively high boost pressure. So apparently that means you need a small wastegate rather than a big one. But yeah, I got these from Turbo Dynamics. Big thank you to them for doing a good price for me. Very friendly, knowledgeable people as well. So yeah, recommend them. So yeah, let's go take a look under the car. We're going to get the downpipe off and try and get the stock exhaust manifold off. And see, I mean, me and Bryn have already had a good look at where exactly this can all go and where we can fit stuff and where we can fit pipes, but we couldn't take the stock exhaust manifold off, so we couldn't see perfectly. So now we're going to do that. Alright, so we've got the stock exhaust manifold off. I've just put the flange for the new exhaust manifold on there just to make sure it fits, which it does, so that's a good start. And just get a rough idea of where things are going to be. But yeah, if we come take a look over here, this is the stock exhaust manifold. This is my first feeble attempt at mocking up something like how it's going to be. Don't pay much attention to this. The design will probably change completely. This was literally just me sort of getting used to how all the pieces fit around each other and stuff like that, and what sort of shapes I can make. I'm not sure exactly where the collector's going to sit yet. It's going to be somewhere around there, so it's just kind of a case of figuring stuff out. But the room for the turbo is so tight, I'll show you. Right, so we're underneath the car. That's the gearbox, that's the engine up front, and there's a steering column, just to give you some idea of where we are. And basically this is where the turbo is going to go. We're going to have one over this side, one over here. If I hold this one up, you get some sort of idea of what we're thinking. About there. But as you can probably tell, if I actually put it in sort of roughly the position it's going to be in, there's not a lot of space up there. There's not a lot of space to either side of it. Start hitting these fuel lines. There's not a lot of space in general basically. So that's kind of the challenge that we're working with. I've already cleared as much space as I can. I've bent this fuel line out of the way. That was just for the evap system, so don't worry, it's been capped off for ages. And also, before anybody says why on earth are you mounting them there, it looks like a really awkward place, there isn't really any better option. A lot of the twin turbo kits that are already on the market mount them slightly further forward, just in front of the steering column basically. But then you have to use a short log manifold. I don't really want to do that. I'm trying to kind of do this in the best way possible. So we're going to make a tubular manifold. I think that'll be more challenging and more sort of interesting to make as well. But yeah, it's either mount them around here or mount them right at the back basically, like in the rear bumper. There's pretty much your only options with this car because the engine bay is so tight. So the challenge that we have with mounting them here is getting all the piping to them. We've obviously got to get the exhaust manifold into a collector, like all 3 of those exhaust ports have got to merge together into a collector and then into the top of the turbo, like turbine housing. We're going to have this coming off the compressor outlets. This is what's going to go to the intercooler. Once that fuel pipe there is moved, this will be a lot easier, but you get the idea. It's going to loop through the steering column there. There's a little bit of room, like you can see there's a bit of wiggle room there, and once that fuel line's gone it'll be a bit better. So yeah, that's going to kind of come off the top of the turbo, go something like that. Obviously we'll need a 90-degree thing off the top of the turbo, which is going to be hitting this, so we're going to have to file some of this back, I think. Like I said, it's very tight for space. So yeah, that'll go off up there and run to the intercooler. And then the main issue I'm having is the pipe that goes from the air filter, which is going to be at the front of the car, to the front of the turbo, which, like I say, is going to be sat around here somewhere. Because that's got to be a bit bigger, and getting it through here with the exhaust manifold as well, it's proven to be a bit of a nightmare. So this is the pipe that's going to go from the air filter. Like I say, it's a little bit bigger than the other one. And what I'm thinking is we'll have like a 45-degree coming out of the turbo, something like that, probably the silicone one. And then a 45-degree going around here, again round the steering column, nice and awkward as usual. And then it's basically going to go off, if I can put that in the right place, it's going to go off over there somewhere. It does kind of fit, but if I go up top, you'll see how awkward it is when you factor the exhaust manifold into it. Right, so now we're up top, hopefully you can get a better idea, especially if I put one of these exhaust manifold bends in somewhere like where it's going to go. So we put that there. The space between this, I mean, you're not going to be able to see very well, but the space between that and like that's touching the intercooler pipe now. So you can see that tiny gap is what I've got to work with. That is as much space as we've got. Bearing in mind the exhaust manifold is going to be super hot and the intercooler pipe doesn't want to be hot. It's tricky, and that's only like one part of the exhaust manifold, you know what I mean? There's all the other bits as well that have got to bend round, and again, that's touching it there. Like, it's a nightmare. We can get this a tiny bit lower once we trim that engine mount heat shield, so I'm kind of just praying that that's going to free up enough space to do what we want. I have considered as well bringing one part of the exhaust manifold up instead of down. It's like having that loop up this way and then sort of across here and then down. But I don't know, like nobody else does that, so I feel like there's probably a really good reason why people don't do that. So I think what I'm going to do now is take the engine out. I'm going to take the whole front end of the car off and then just basically lift the engine out. Just because then I can get to a load of stuff at the back there, clear some more space. Like this secondary firewall thing, we can maybe get rid of some of that, have some of the intercooler pipes come up and over. That could potentially save quite a bit of space. I also might redo this power steering line, because that is one of the things that other intercooler pipe, or intake pipe, sorry, was getting sort of stuck on. So we could lower that down a bit more if I can reroute that. But yeah, it's going to be quite a bit of work to get the engine out, so let's get started.
Go.
Right, while I've got the front of the car off, getting ready to take the engine out, I figured this would be a very good time to kind of show you in a bit more detail some of the challenges and sort of the way we're going to try and deal with them. So this pipe here is the big pipe that's coming from the air intake to the turbo, which is the one that I said is a bit of a problem when you combine it with the exhaust manifold. I can't remember if I already explained this, but the plan is to trim that engine mount. You can see just under there, that engine mount is basically what that pipe is rested on. Well, the heat shield for the engine mount, sorry, not the actual engine mount itself. And that's what the pipe is kind of getting stuck on at the moment, and the power steering line. I might remake this power steering line, I haven't decided yet, because the problem is if I remake it, it's still going to have to go a pretty similar route and have heat shield stuff all over it and be probably a similar thickness, so I'm not really going to gain a lot other than just a little bit more flexibility, but we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. The plan at the moment, like I say, is to trim the heat shield on the engine mount there, and then that pipe will do basically a 90-degree down. You can see how tight it is at the moment. Basically come down there. Again, it's super tight at the moment, but once we've trimmed a few things, should get a little bit better, and then it can go off to the air filter, which will sit somewhere around here in the wheel arch, basically. Not in the actual wheel arch where the wheel would hit it, but like further up front here where the washer bottle was, so somewhere around there. So that's kind of what we're going for on that side. On this side, let me get a light so you can see. Right, in theory, this side should be easier because we haven't got the steering column to deal with, but in reality, it's just as bad because we've got the starter motor, we've got the clutch slave cylinder line, Got another coolant pipe up top as well that you can't see from here. But basically, this pipe is going to go through there, which I didn't really want to do originally, but I'm going to get some stiffer engine mounts so that the engine's not moving as much. And then the very small clearances that we've got aren't quite as big of an issue because hopefully the engine isn't going to rock and move around as much. If I get a straight bit of tube, you get a better idea. If I put that where it's not actually touching anything, you've got about 3 or 4 mil either side of it before it starts hitting either the subframe or the engine mount or the starter motor. So the plan here is to trim this engine mount bit here a little bit. That should give us a little bit more room. Maybe cut this sort of hump out and just weld a flat bit in. I don't know, we'll see if we have to go to that extreme. But yeah, that's some of the problems that we're facing, some of the ways we're going to try and get around them. The intercooler pipe from this turbo, so the pipe coming from the turbo to the intercooler, is going to just kind of go up and over. There's a fair bit of room around here. It's going to be a smaller pipe than this, so there's a fair bit of room for that to come up and over. The exhaust manifold shouldn't get in the way of that too much. But yeah, like I know people are going to say, oh, why on earth are you doing it in such a weird way? But honestly, this car, there is not really any other way of doing it. Like I don't want to go below because that feels like it's more likely to get crushed, but in reality, with stiffer engine mounts, hopefully it won't move much, and we should be okay. But I don't know. At the moment, it's still kind of all up in the air. Some of this might change, but I just wanted to kind of give you an idea of the plan at the moment. But yeah, let's carry on with taking the engine out, and then we'll see where we are after that.
Go.
Alright, so we've got the engine out, as you can see. I just want to explain these weird things that are made. Originally I was going to be using lifting straps, these things, instead of chains, but it turned out the straps were way too long and there wasn't a good way to sort of take up the extra slack, so yeah, I ended up using the chains. So these were made with the idea of using the lifting straps, but it was a good bit of TIG practice. Like, look, got some semi-decent welds there, if it'll focus. It won't focus. But yeah, it was a good bit of practice, just making stuff. But yeah, they do look a little bit weird and a bit overkill with the chains on, but whatever, it does the job, lifts it up. The reason for doing that, by the way, is because Nissan don't provide any official like lifting points for this engine. I think they want you to drop the subframe out and take the engine out the bottom, but I didn't want to do that. So I've lifted it by those 2 big bolts on the front there and 2 of the bell housing bolts you probably can't see. So yeah, I've made a complete mess of this place. Like, look at the amount of shit over there, it's getting a bit ridiculous. And speaking of making a mess, I've just chopped out part of the like secondary firewall here. The reason being, this secondary firewall thing kind of comes out and then up. It doesn't just go straight up there. So that was getting right in the way of where we could potentially route one of the intercooler pipes. Instead of going through the steering column here, which I don't really want to do because it's very tight and obviously this is rotating, and if they do touch, it's going to just wear the pipe out. So yeah, instead of that, we could just have the intercooler pipe go straight up and then across here. But I'll see, I'll get the engine back in at some point and then fit the turbo up to where it's going to be and see if we have now got enough room. I think we should be okay there. So that's one option. The other pipes are still going to be a pain in the ass, the ones that go down here. So yeah, still lots of things to figure out, but we're getting there. Alright, I think that'll probably do for this video because there was a lot of talking, a lot of explanation throughout, so it's kind of dragged on a bit. Also, I was quite ill for a couple of weeks, so it's made the whole thing take a lot longer. Future episodes should be out quite a lot quicker, hopefully. Like I say, hopefully once a week, but it depends. If I don't get much done in a certain week, then I'm not just going to put a video out of nothing really happening. But as long as I manage to keep sort of progressing at the rate I've done the last few days, we should be alright. So yeah, there'll be a lot more stuff going on in the future episodes, a bit less talking. Although, I don't know, like I said, some people are going to want more sort of in-depth like explanations of what I'm doing and why. So it's not just going to be full-on like montages with no explanation. I'm never going to do that. But I'll try and keep it a bit lighter because I'm conscious I did sort of repeat myself quite a bit in this video because it was all filmed so far apart, like I say, because I didn't do a lot for a couple of weeks. So yeah, it probably wasn't the best video. But whatever, we're getting somewhere, the engine's out, we're cutting stuff up, it's all good fun. So yeah, I'll see you in the next episode, which will be hopefully doing the manifold and I don't know, whatever else we get up to. Oh, one other thing to show you actually. Not sure if you can see, but we've got a new fuel tank. So yeah, big thank you to Alloy Racing Fabrications who made that for me, custom sizes and stuff, custom fittings. It looks spot on so far. I've had a good look around it. It looks a lot better than what I would have been able to make. So yeah, we're going to get rid of the stock fuel tank and run all new lines and everything. We'll go through that in another video. That might be in the next video as well as the manifold because I want to get the fuel lines in so I know exactly where they are so I can kind of work around that. So yeah, lots of fun stuff to look forward to. I'll see you in the next video.